Afternoon, everyone. Woo. Thank you for being here at the last session of JNUC 2016, but I think we've done a little of the saving the best for last. We have a real treat for you today. All the way from DataJar in the UK, we have Ben Toms here and James Ridsdale. And if you have a question during their session, please tweet it to JNUC 2016 FAF, which is F-A-F-F. I'm supposedly going to find out what that means. So JNUC 2016 FAF. And give it up for our presenters, Ben and James.
Hello everyone, how you doing? Come on, keep it real. Come on. Keep awake, we keep awake. Okay, so today, last one, make it count. Profiles, an IT admin's best friend. I am James Ridsdale, I'm a director at DataJar, and this is...
I'm Ben Toms, the senior systems engineer for DataJar, and... Mac Mule, resident ass that you can find at working for us, Java Nation or Slack.
And you sound like Barry White today.
I'm sorry.
Okay. So about DataJar. We're based in Brighton, digital hub of the UK. We're part of the ACN. We work with Apple Retail. We also work with Apple Corporate. We host an MSP around 50 JSSs. We're also a Jamf integrator. We've got tens of thousands of devices in our platform, which isn't Jamf Cloud, it's our own. And we're also a Jamf Gold partner. So today's agenda, we're going to go over the history, the theory, the idiosyncrasies, I pronounced that right, and usage. Okay, all of the information from today is going to be posted up on our GitHub. I think that might even be up there now, but never mind. Everything we're going to be doing today is going to be up there, so I'll show this URL at the end as well. Okay, now a bit of history. See how old some of you are in the audience. Okay, in the beginning, in 2001, we had Mac OS 10. Who remembers that? And with it came property lists. I wasn't using OS 9, and this was like, what? Anyway, so here we've got a property list. We've got it's basically readable XML, and we're going to talk about this in a bit. And how do we modify these? Well, we're using defaults or plist buddy. Yes. And this is a really simple configuration of a VPN. Didn't get out much, just coded.
Cheers.
Property lists, so how do they work? Well, we'll come to that in a bit. In 2002, Mac OS 10.2, yeah. And with it came Workgroup Manager.
Seriously?
Slow clap. So, yeah, Workgroup Manager, you can see here, it was kind of like a place where we could edit these so-called plists, but they could be distributed out via a directory service. Remember these? Yes. This was the idea. You joined your Mac to your Mac server for authentication and management. And then you had a perfectly configured Mac. However, most of us had Windows directory services. So what we did is we joined our Mac to our directory service, and then in turn, the Mac would be joined to the Apple server, and then we would get our management and authentication. And this was known as... Why is that yellow? Anyway, you could also enroll a Mac into your JSS. This is still called JSS at this point because it's old. And you're going to get your management from there. Okay, frequency. How are these settings applied to your clients? Well, we had once, like fill existing users or fill user templates. We also had often, which were applied at every logon, but not forced, so the user could change them. And we also had always, so they were basically always on. Except when you're using a JSS, initially, we couldn't use this because at every logon, we essentially refresh the MCX cache until somebody put in a feature request, and this was fixed in 9.8. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Anyway, in 2007, something big happened, and it was the arrival of the iPhone. And I can't believe I'm about to do this, but... Oh, no. Where's the audio? Oh, no. No. Now it's just men on stage. No, no. Can we get audio? They're radioing upstairs. Panic, panic. Well. We're going to have this again. No audio. Oh, no. What could go wrong, they said. I don't think anyone's noticed. We on?
Too sexy for
MCX.
Too sexy.
MCX.
I'm too sexy for my shirt. Too sexy for my shirt. So sexy it hurts. I'm a model. You know what I mean? And I do my little turn on the catwalk. Yeah, on the catwalk. On the catwalk. Yeah, I do my little turn on the catwalk. My car, too sexy for my car, too sexy by far. And I'm too sexy for my hat, too sexy for my hat. What you think about that? I'm a model, you know what I mean. And I do my little turn on the catwalk. Yeah, on the catwalk. Yeah, on the catwalk. Yeah, I shake my little tush on the catwalk.
MCX.
Come on. We got there, we got there. We even had T-shirts done and everything. So, I think any questions as well, it's always, was it hashtag JNUC 2016 FAF or hashtag I'm too sexy for MCX? Yes. Okay, you're still bearing with this. Okay, in 2008, we had config profiles. How do we modify those? We used IPCU, and you can see here, this is kind of an early, well, we're used to this interface nowadays when you're dealing with MDM. Configuration profiles, how do they work? Well, we'll come to that in a little bit. In 2011 was the year of the MDM, came iOS 5, and macOS 10.7. Who's been playing with the slides? Is it you?
A little bit.
Okay, so looking at the golden triangle. Again, just like using that word. And let's bring this up to date a little bit more. So, by today's standards, what we can do is we can use the JSS to make our changes. That will then push a request out to Apple's APN. That will go to the device. The device is then told to contact its MDM. The MDM change is then applied to the client, and the feedback is sent back to the MDM. Perfect. Does that look familiar? More triangles. Okay. In 2013 came iOS 7 and Mavericks, and with it came preference caching and CFprefD, which broke this.
Oh.
Oh. We like hundreds of lines of code. Anyway, defaults will still work because that uses the preferences API. Anyway, Ben.
Hello. Okay. So on the screen, we've got on the left-hand side a iOS configuration profile, and on the right, we've got a macOS configuration profile. So despite the fact that we're starting to manage settings on two completely different devices, you can see that the actual content in them is very, very similar. How do they work? Kind of what we're hoping to give you an idea of. So this is some stuff from Apple's developer documentation. I'm just going to read it quick, basically. iOS and macOS uniquely identifies the bundle. Each distinct Apple bundle on the system must have a unique bundle ID. The system uses this string to identify your app in many ways. And for example, the preferences system uses this string to identify the app for which a given preference applies. So if you're doing anything with profiles for your macOS, you'll see that. You'll see the bundle identifiers, the com.apple.com. No, that wouldn't work. com.apple.finder, things like that. And that's kind of the way that, first of all, that the OS knows that the contents of that file apply to that application. Precedence. This slide will explain more what I mean by that. So within macOS, there are several locations in which preference files can sit. And there's kind of a precedence for them where they composite. So in here we've got the user library, the local library, which is at the root, the network library, which I hope nobody's really using, and fourth, the system library. So it's there again. And this includes locations that are within that. So that would be your by host files or your containers that we've got now. When we start managing settings, what happens is essentially where they sit on the machine is in another folder, that library managed preferences. And these are present. So anything that's set there is then overwrites anything that's set in the other locations. In iOS, got something a little bit different. As the apps are sandboxed, they don't actually have like a shared library or shared locations for these. But as James was saying about the year of MDM and us being able to manage apps, there was something that came out with iOS 7, and it's called app configuration. If you guys have been doing self-service and deploying the application itself manually through the JSS, then you would have seen this. And Jamf are one of the few EMM kind of vendors involved with a community on this to try and have more developers leveraging this technology, which will be great for us. Because you can imagine deploying iOS apps and actually having them configured for the user would be quite nice. What this looks like, in the actual app bundle itself is going to be another plist, the com.apple.configuration.manage. That's going to have your profile settings in there. And then it has the CF bundle identified plist, so that same format that we were talking about before. So how do these things composite? If we've got multiple files in multiple different locations, how does that kind of work? So again, bundle identifier at the top, and then you've got your payload. So that was in the basic preference, plist. And again, if you look at a profile, you'll see this in there. You've got your bundle identifier again, and then you've got your payload. Now, I can give this as an example using AD Pass 1 because it's a project that I'm currently maintaining. So the application itself, when it launches, it uses a preferences API called NSUserDefaults to register that it's saying, oh, hi, I'm AD Pass 1. These are my preference files, and it starts to register its default settings based on that. And it iterates over the P list in the order of the precedents that were shown before. So, manage preferences first, and user library, etc., etc. What does this mean? This means that if a preference key is found in one location, then this is used over any subsequent location it finds it at. So, you push a profile down to set a key to say allow password change to be true, and that sits in manage preferences in that folder. The users has got their own preference P list that says false. The profile wins because of that precedence order, and that's how they composite. So you can have multiple preferences in multiple locations, but the true value is composited by the preferences system and the various APIs involved with that. So that's kind of the theory behind some of these things, but there are some interesting idiosyncrasies and stuff that you might come against. One of the first things, we looked at the frequency. Largely, with profiles, it's forced. And you'll see this. There is actually a frequency option in profiles, and you will see that there. Again, from Apple, except for changing passwords, users generally can't change settings that are defined in a configuration profile. There is MTX to profile, which Tim Sutton wrote, which allows you to take a plist, and you set a frequency on there, but you're going to have different results on different OSs, and maybe some applications don't respect it if they're on a once or an often. Maybe. Okay, and the identification. So we're back to the same slide again, but there's a difference here. Every kind of payload within a profile has its own identifier. So you can have payloads with profiles with multiple payloads within them. And you're going to be identified with these identifiers that are on there. And then we look at applying them. So we kind of got I'm hoping I'm making some sense about the compositing, where they sit and how these things work. But what about actually applying the things? So please stop killing CFRFD. Please. It's a daemon process. Any other application that is potentially trying to update a preference file, when you kill that, it's going to lose those settings. Because we're compositing from multiple sources, caching, the CFRFD is the thing that is going to help and make sure that the right value is being applied across. But what that does mean is that plist buddy really can't be used anymore, like James was saying earlier, unless the application's not been run yet, because then it hasn't got the domain registered with the preferences APIs. So you could use it if you were writing out a plist for an app and then launch the app afterwards, or if you were writing to a remote volume, so say through Casper Imaging. Defaults does work with the API, so you can write to it, and then you'll see if you do a defaults write to a plist, you look at the plist, you'll see the dot random bit at the end of it, and that's the part of that composition. Checking preferences. So obviously, again, we can go into manage preferences, we can have a look to see what's in there. But how would you know what's the true value? Which we looked at the managed preferences there and saw it in a file, but that's not what's been composited. That's just, you're just reading the file itself. So what is it that is actually being applied to the system? So we can use another API for this. It's a little Python script, and it's using CF preferences. So the CF preferences daemon, this is kind of the same API that's using. And what this is doing, this is looking for the com.apple.appstore bundle identifier, looking for the key, restrict store, require admin to install. I really should have chosen a shorter key, really, shouldn't I? It's ridiculous. And then it's going to return back the value of that key, and it's going to turn back if it's forced. So from there, we can tell the key's set to false, but it's forced, which means it's being managed via a profile. So you do this, you look at your CF bundle identifier, you can run this script, you can use it in an EA, things like that if you want, and it's on our GitHub. And then you'll be able to get the true value of actually what's applied. You're not going to be reading 5 different files that aren't compositing, because you're not compositing the answer when you're doing that. So use the API to look for things. And the push notifications. I mean, we saw this earlier, but kind of the traffic flow, but actually, when does it apply? I mean, they can apply any time, really. Really? Kind of. So there are some caveats with this. Computer level will generally kind of apply to the device immediately. And user level can be applied immediately in some cases, often when an MDM-enabled user logs in, which is when you kind of get this kind of window when they log in. And really, if you remember the golden triangle thing that we're talking about with the OD, kind of that similar thing. They're logging in, then they get their profiles from the MDM, and then they're applying the managed preferences and doing the API composition and all this other process is going through. Some warnings with some of these as well. So the way that profiles kind of work, if you look at networking, for example, the way that a lot of time profiles work is when you, I've broken it now. Cool. So if you change a profile, the old profile's removed and the new profile's pulled back down. If you've got iPads on wireless only, no cellular, you push out a new wireless profile, they lose access to the wireless, and they can't go back to the MDM to pull down the new profile. JSS does warn you about this, and has anybody actually done anything like that? I mean, I have. Anybody else? Yeah. It's not good, is it? It's not a nice feeling. But just a warning on that, so it kind of removes and then replaces. Generally, there are some other things, oddities with this, so if you set a passcode policy on iOS, you can say the maximum time that the passcode's set for, but it won't actually change the user's time unless they exceed that. It's all these idiosyncrasies that you need to kind of test and try out. Now, this is something I did, which was, again, interesting. I was deploying VPN profiles to users in the previous role, and because it wanted to store a password in the system keychain, it was prompting the users for an admin password. I had 3 profiles that they kept being asked for the password for, which wasn't very nice. Other things with this as well, if you have the App Store locked down to require admin password or the iTunes password for the same restriction in iOS, and then you're using managed app distribution, you're then going to be prompted for the admin password, deploying stuff through there as well. So you need to kind of think about how these are working and maybe what else they're going to affect. And so as I said, whilst profiles can be deployed at any time, the applications that they are for may not composite their preferences until they are launched after the profile is being applied. The example again with that, AD Passmon, it loads up, it uses register defaults as part of the NS user defaults API, and it will look for its preferences then. If you push a profile out and change a setting while it's running, the application won't see it. And so that's why, I know we're saying it kind of applies-ish, so the device might have it, but you might not see the changes until maybe the application's equipped. But apps and bundles can actually have, as part of the API they can leverage to look for changed keys. See, we have this with the dock, we have this with Finder, and a couple of other things. Download your profiles from the JSS, and it looks lovely, right? But if you want to see what's going on there, the guys at AMSys have done a great automator action. So you can download a profile, right-click it, de-sign it, and then put it into XML. Really simple. We use it all the time to see what keys are in the profiles. And why might we do this? Well, sometimes, first of all, if you look in the JSS UI, and it's the same thing with Profile Manager on this, that option's not checked, but because you're deploying the payload, you actually are setting that option, just to kind of give you a warning. So I said, that happens in the JSS, that happens in Profile Manager. And you kind of get to a sticky situation sometimes where if you've got keys that are fighting, 2 profiles that are fighting, you can have odd results. So we've seen it recently, and we've had to pull down the profile, have a quick look, see what's going on, and then try and make sense of things. What Apple say, if 2 payloads define different network settings for the same SSID, for example, the result is undefined. So if you've got 2 profiles with competing payloads, the result is undefined. The restrictive setting is normally used. In some cases, the result is undefined. So be very careful with it. Try and scope these really clean. Look at what you're deploying, and sometimes you actually might have a profile with multiple payloads in there because they might be managing different parts of the login window and things like that. It's a matter of having that awareness. And then you could use like the CF preferences scripts as well to just quickly verify what is actually being set. And a lot of this stuff, there's a lot of great information actually in the Profile Manager help guide. It's quite interesting that actually the help guide for Profile Manager is better than the product. So, it's not all doom and gloom.
Okay, so it is good, promise you. Okay, let's look at some of the things we can do here. So again, we've got our plist file, we've got our payload, and we've got our preference domain. We're going to take that, we're going to upload it into our JSS, and we can see there it's pulled in the preference domain and the payload down the bottom. And we can apply that out to our systems, and that setting will be applied. How do we find out where these settings are? So you could use Composer to find out when you're adjusting your keys, adjusting your settings in your app, the settings you want to capture. You could run Composer, see what files are being changed, or simply as I do it, just use the Finder. And I look what's being modified, and from there I've got a plist that I can look at, and then I can drag that into an editor and start manipulating that. There's plenty of help out there, certainly on Jamf Nation and also on Mac Admin Slack. The community's been fantastic. I know Ben and myself contribute. It's a great thing. Rusty's also got an absolutely fantastic post on all this, and this will be included on our GitHub, which you'll have the link at the end. Okay. Excuse the pixelated icons. It looks even worse on that massive screen. These have been taken straight from the JSS. There are some 53 different payloads to choose, which are actually built into the JSS from the beginning. And we've got macOS payloads here, so we can apply stuff on a computer level, and equally for a user level. There's 25 for user and 28 for computer. And in here we can adjust settings, can configure email accounts and all those other bits and pieces. On iOS, there is just one level to manage, and there are 30 different options to select there. As Ben mentioned earlier, you could also, when deploying an iOS app, you can utilize the app config, and you can use these variables within the app config to get that app pre-configured by the time it hits the device. There's a full list of variables here. This is from docs.jamfsoftware.com. On the left, we've got a list of computer variables, and on the right, we have the iOS variables. These can be applied, put into a config profile for dynamic configuration of the endpoint device. Okay, so how would you pull these things together? So let's say we've got 500 iPads, and we want the asset tag displayed on the front of the device. Well, quite simply, utilizing the variables, we can create a quick smart group or target group. Okay, put our message in there, adjust the lock screen payload, and put $asset_tag in there. And on the lock screen on those devices, that's what's going to be displayed. We use this all the time. You can automatically configure mail accounts on devices. Again, you can bring in $email, $username, and you can apply that out to your endpoint devices, and everything gets automatically configured. Really, really powerful. We've also got examples of automatically, the workflow I'm going to show you next is a Mac at data jar. Typically, what happens to our devices when we do eventually afford to buy new hardware through debt, we get our new Shine devices, and they look like this.
I have a pen, I have an apple, apple pen. I have a pen, I have pineapple, pineapple pen, apple pen, pineapple pen, pen pineapple, apple pen. apple, pineapple, apple, pear.
As you can see from that, there's no scripting, nothing. It was all minimal, and it literally, with the music, that happens during every DEP enrollment. You realise that? That music is played. Customers love it. So so it's really, really quick. It's instantaneous to get that config onto the devices. Minimal effort from our side. And once you've got, you can query all that inventory data you have in your JSS, and you can pass that through, and you can automatically configure things far easier and far more quickly. Simple. Okay. That's it from us.
All right, thank you very much for that. That was an awesome presentation. Now I have 2 hashtags to follow for questions on Twitter. We did have a few questions, though. First question is, do you guys recommend compositing profiles where possible, or split them out as granular as possible?
Well, the blog post I had for my blog with the recent issues kind of show that really you should be compositing them. Everything we try and do now, I think most of us admins are going to be in modular workflows, so you're going to have an item for everything. So ideally, I'd rather have everything to be separate, but as we saw, there was issues, so it's kind of having more that awareness of what is being set within the payloads, and if you have to composite, composite. If you don't, don't. So I really don't have an answer, so sorry.
That works. That was kind of an answer. Do best practices dictate a single payload per profile?
No.
Great.
That was, sorry, actually, so that's kind of the same as the other question, but again, on the Profile Manager documentation, you'll see that Apple have got a number of profiles that they recommend have multiple payloads for. So, mail accounts, VPN, certificates, so they actually say these ones here, you can have multiple payloads in the same profile to set these different accounts. And others, they say, use a singular profile to set the payload for these. But that doesn't mean that the profile doesn't have to have other payloads within it. That makes sense. Right.
That makes sense.
Okay.
When pushing settings via a profile, should an app be restarted versus killing it with a CFPREFSD before changes manifest?
Yes. Just quit the app. You use what Apple have put in there. Don't try and break the system because you're impatient. Sorry. I get a bit heated on this, sorry.
That's fair. We also have a couple questions about where people might be able to purchase a data jar hoodie.
Meet me outside.
He has a stand.
I don't think we're selling them.
Some van parked outside.
Yeah. Right. Only fools and horses. English joke, sorry.
And then, is there anyone in the audience with a question that doesn't have Twitter or wants to call out a question?
Anyone? Anyone?
Oh, no.
Anyone?
Really? Oh, we've got one right here.
Hello, Rich.
I've seen a case where you can set a preference with the default commands, but you can't manage it with the profile. What might cause that?
So, when I was showing the cfprefs.py, kind of little script, that says if a setting is forced. Good point.
Yes.
Thanks, Nick. Anyway, so Rich was asking, Rich was saying that basically sometimes you can write a setting out in a P list via defaults right, but it doesn't show up as kind of managed or, you can write a setting, deploy a payload with a profile, and it doesn't show up as kind of managed, so it doesn't like be grayed out and stuff like that, I guess. That's what you mean, is the users can change the setting or?
Like, for example, do you turn off onshore discovery?
Yeah.
There's a default command you can run, but if you build a profile to manage that same setting, the profile will not manage the setting.
Okay, so, right. So what Rich was talking about is some examples, things are using P lists, but they're actually not using the APIs, which is fun. So the P lists are doing this composition piece. They've got different areas and things like that, and applications should be using them to pick these things up. If you're doing a default writes command to a file, it's like we used to do with the MCX once, where it's kind of editing the file itself. So if that application isn't working with a profile, then It's because they're not using those kind of APIs. They're not using the right keys. They're just literally reading from the file, essentially. So that's why you'd actually have to go that script route again with that. There are other applications and other things that you can look at where, you know, Finder or, sorry, who here sets Finder to show network volumes on the desktop, right? But it's not grayed out, is it? It's not grayed out. You try and click that button all day long, it's not grayed out. It would just sit there as blue, won't it? Whereas other settings that you set are then grayed out. So it depends on the application and how they then, what APIs they then use, and also if it's managed or it's forced, they can then react in a different way. So the force thing you can also see through the CF preferences script. So there's no real answer apart from with all this is just testing really, because people do follow bad practices.
Surely it falls under undefined.
Oh, undefined, sorry, I got that.
There we go.
Yeah, I should have said that, you could have 5 minutes back.
Any other questions?
Up there, Jen.
We have someone up here? Yes.
Speaking back to the composites, you know, whether you roll them all into a composite or not, the complexity or the number of profiles a given client has, is there a correlation to how long that logging delay after, what is it, 20, 30 seconds, you see the dialogue? Do you expect that when you've got a pretty long list of profiles?
Right. So the question's about the when you log into a JSX, when you log into a Mac that's managed via an MDM, and you've got a load of user-level profiles scoped, how long, or is it expected for there to be a delay at the user login because we've got so many being pushed there? Yeah, it's kind of, I've certainly seen it quite a lot, but with that as well, what I would say, if you're deploying stuff for, say, Office first run dialogues, so that you dismiss them or something, deploy it at a computer level. Don't limit maybe what you're using at a user level, because then that will speed the time up. So you can deploy computer level profiles for things like applications, and they'll affect every user. But the times when you'd want to maybe use a user level profile is when you want to use variables for that user. So that's what I was doing with the VPN. I was getting the username, but then I didn't realise that it was then trying to say password to the keychain, and then we had other problems with that. So I would say, well, almost all of what we do now is computer level, and that will just apply across. And it's just minimise those user level settings. And then you find the logins quicker. And again, if you've got com.microsoft.word, you could manage that at a user and a computer level with 2 different profiles, with those payload keys within there. So you could have 2 Microsoft profiles, but it's the keys themselves. Make sure they don't conflict, and you should be fine. And then you can use the CF preferences script to verify the actual payloads that are being applied.
Great. Any other questions?
Up the top.
We have a payload that restricts system preferences icons that seems to be great for the actual system preferences icon, except users can still access it if they go to the menu.
Yeah.
Pull that down. Is there any way to block both of them?
So the question was, it's about the idiosyncrasies again with profiles. So you can lock down system preferences so that they're all grayed out, but users can go to the menu and then still access the preferences from there. And that's that's just what an idiosyncrasy of that profile and how the system preferences app is working with them. All you can really do for that, unless somebody's got another method, but that, I would say that's bug report with Apple and to get them to change the behaviour.
That's undefined?
No.
Oh. So there's not a default rights command that you could do that would block people's access to those preference panes. People have done horrible things with this before and kind of changed the rights and stuff to those panes. And with SIP, you probably can't do that anymore, which is a good thing. But I'd be speaking to Apple about this and trying to get that behaviour changed. MDM is very much the future of macOS, and who knows if we get to a point at some point where we're not able to do scripts and things. We have to deliver everything via MDM. So if you guys need some stuff done and you realise you can't do it via a profile, bug Apple, and hopefully it'll come along. That was the point of the last video. What we can do now, we can do firewall. We can do firewall encryption now, we can do firewall now, we can do all these kind of great things with the profiles. We started off that big plist buddy script at the beginning was me writing out a VPN profile.
Well, you do that through a JSS with a single payload now. So it's great. So there are great things coming, but if you're missing something or the behavior isn't what you want, bug Apple, bug Apple, bug Apple.
Reportable. We have a question over here, too.
So we have an interesting thing we've seen in our environment. We have machines of various stripes of OS, so maybe Yosemite, Sierra, and we've seen that certain configuration profiles that have been pushed down, say, Yosemite, sometimes don't work, but in Sierra they do work. And so we've had to create two separate profiles, scope them out, based on their OS version. And I think it might even dovetail what Bruce was saying about the defaults, right? I'm wondering if there's a way to maybe create some logic within a single profile that would be able to be scoped to everything and not just individual systems, and you can
Okay.
capture.
So the question is, yeah. Well, so profiles occasionally with the payloads, they might have payloads in there that work with one OS and not another. And kind of, is there a way of putting logic into a profile so that it only applies to the pertinent OSs? No. But I mean, that's the JSS's job really. The JSS is doing the logic. I mean, essentially, look, we went through this whole thing about managed preferences and all that. We're still deploying the same flat files. So they're just the flat files you need to get to a device. So the JSS needs to be doing the logic for you on that part.
Scoping.
Scoping, yeah.
All right, well, I think we're at the end of our time. Oh, well, we had one more?
One more?
Maybe we can do one. We can do one more. We'll do you.
So it's, I hope it's not a stupid question. A lot of this went over my head, so I'm pretty new to it. I haven't even had a jump start yet with Jamf. Where can someone like myself that doesn't know anything about scripting go to learn or start doing all these cool things that I don't know anything about?
Jamf Nation, Slack. Sorry again.
Oh, yes.
I just wanted to answer. So
Where can I go to learn
yeah.
about these various types of scripting? Get started,
So the gentleman's just, he's got to do his jump start soon. He's not had any kind of scripting experience or anything like that. And we'll ask him where to kind of get that knowledge from. And yep, there's Jamf Nation and Slack, the community, your peers, the guys that sit around you, Everyone here, it's the great thing about this Mac admin community, we're all happy to help each other out. So go there. And the other thing, when you've had your jump start, you might start looking at things, maybe workflows that you want to do and things. And having a challenge is a great way of learning. If you have a challenge, there's something a goal you want to achieve, and then reach out, speak to people. Other people might blog stuff, and then you'll start deciphering that, or you might want to write it yourself. And yeah, a challenge and the community. Then you'd suddenly be away. Cool.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. Thank you so much to Ben and James.